we will get going with our next panel, and we're going to be focusing on the future of industrial services in this era of the fourth industrial revolution. And I see some folks coming up. Looks like you're mic'd up. Good, good. We got one here. Great.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so I have three. Is there a fourth one coming? Yeah, here he is. All right, I got it. I haven't had a chance to meet all of you yet, so I'm feeling my way along as we set this up, but good to see you all. Yeah, and really how industrial services are changing as a result of the Internet of Things, the fourth industrial revolution, the different expectations that suppliers and customers and vendors all have about how they do business and how they relate to one another, and how that's going to evolve as we move forward through this decade. And so we're fortunate today to have some great industrial services organizations with us to talk about this topic. And let's see, I'm going to go down the list here and make sure I get this straight. We've got Dan Crowley here from the Triumph Group. And then
Mansour.
Mansour, okay, Mansour Janahi from the group CEO of Sanad. Good, got that one right. And then we've got Richard Petrucci, Managing Director of White Oak, and Elias Marawi, the Vice President of Civil Business with Thales? Is that Thales.
Yeah.
Thales. Okay, I had a 50-50 chance of getting that right. So I got as close as I could. I think one place to start is tell us a little bit more about your businesses and where you fit into this topic. And I'll start right here with Dan, and we'll just work our way right down the
Okay,
panel.
great, thanks. Well, Triumph is a mid-cap multinational manufacturing company. We have about 25 factories all over the U.S., Europe, also in Mexico, and we're supporting the aerospace industry. So we build everything from landing gear to brakes and wheels and gearboxes and accessories for the engines. In fact, we're partnered with Senad, my partner to the left, Mansour, for supplying engine components that are used in the UAE. So it's great to be here with so many friends from the UAE. Salam alaikum, and be a part of the success and the growth of that region.
Two guys in aerospace. Have you met Christina Casadas yet? I got to pray. I hope you've had a chance to talk. I'm sure she wants to talk with the two of you. Hey, Mansour, how about you? Tell us a little bit about Sanad.
So I'm very pleased to be here. I actually had the opportunity of meeting you 3 years ago when we first came to Pittsburgh, so it's good to be back. So just to tell you a bit about Senad, so we're a company that's been in business for 35 years. We're very proudly a UAE-based company. We're owned by the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Abu Dhabi Mubadala. What we focus on is basically industrial services. We support the energy sector, as well as the aviation sector. In terms of size, we're roughly around revenue-wise, we do about $600 million of revenue annually. We've got about $1.2 billion of assets under management. And the US is a very big market for us. It represents, I would say, north of 50% of the revenue that we generate. And a key ethos for us is partnerships, and what we're forging with Triumph is a great example of how US and UAE champions and industry players are coming together, not just to service the UAE, but also to service the region.
Well, welcome back. Good to have you here. I think when you were here 3 years ago, we were just talking about maybe having the GMIS Summit in Pittsburgh. So it's great you've been able to come back for that. Richard, how about White Oak? Where do you fit in this space?
Yeah, so White Oak is a private debt manager with about $11 billion of assets under management. Traditionally, White Oak's business was focused on sort of middle market corporate finance. But White Oak has diversified into different areas, whether it's healthcare finance or trade finance or equipment finance, which is actually what I do at White Oak. And as a non-bank participant in equipment finance, we have to look for ways to sort of earn our higher returns, and whether that's going afield potentially from the U.S. or trying to find different ways of doing business than maybe other people in equipment finance. We have to figure out how how to earn extra return without necessarily taking unwarranted risk. And so that's what we try to do.
Okay, we can dig a little deeper on that as we go along maybe, and how you navigate that space. Elias, Thales.
So Thales, we're a French company, international company placed in about 70 countries in the world. We're about 81,000 employees. Turnover during COVID was about 18 billion euro, and now we are hitting about 19 billion euro. So we operate in 5 domains. Aerospace domain, so we provide many components to the airplanes. We provide avionics for the Airbus systems, the in-flight entertainment and connectivity. The other domains is space. We provide the spacecrafts for defense and civil. So we do observations, communications, and telecommunications in the space. We cover the transportation segment, whereby we provide anything that has to do with signaling and air transport controls, defense and security. And security specifically, we protect critical infrastructures such as airports, oil fields, highly sensitive defense sectors. And we do defense. We cover all the way from the ground force, air force, navy force. In the UAE, we've been there for the last 50 years, supporting the defense of the UAE on all 3 segments. And on the civil side, we're also there to provide radars as well, air traffic management, and the in-flight entertainment and connectivity systems in avionics. So we're proud to be here representing Thales and talk more about how we can influence digitally the services side.
Oh, fascinating stuff. What a scope of perspective from all of you in how the world is evolving. And let's talk a little bit about that. There's been so much talk about the 4th Industrial Revolution over the past day or so in doing this. How is what's happening around us when it comes to technology and service expectations, what your customers want? How is it changing the way you think about the way you do business? I'll start with you.
But they've become more demanding. They see it in their personal lives, whether it's the speed of service or the easy access of information. The telemedicine trend is another, service on demand, and they want to see that in what has traditionally been older industries, like in my example, aviation. We're using the digital revolution to not only sell products and services, but the information that goes with it. For example, the heritage of every product and where it has been, its usage cycle, so that in the aftermarket you can establish its value. So this idea of using blockchain technology to know where a part has been from when it was built and how it was built and the mechanic who built it and the torque tools they used to assemble it all the way through its use throughout its life is so key to quality and safety. So we're seeing an impact because of this digital revolution.
Yeah, Mansour, you see it the same way? How's it affecting you?
I think to Dan's point today, the consumer has got access to data. They're closer to their product. So some of the things that we've seen in terms of an evolution. So customers now, they would like their components to be serviced locally. So for example, COVID was a great example. They didn't want to be dependent on a supplier that was outside the country. We're seeing as well end users also are looking for simplicity. So they're like, I want to deal with one supplier versus dealing with 10. So they're looking for someone that can consolidate their requirements through a single channel. I think the third thing that also customers are looking for is flexibility. So, are you able to have a creative commercial model to support their needs? Can they pay over a period of time and so on? I think these are some of the needs. Then there are 3 what I would call there are also rising needs that we see as well. A lot of the end users today have a focus on ESG. How could I, as a service provider, support them in their efforts to reduce their carbon footprint? And then lastly, I would say they would like things digital. So they would like things, to being faster, and they would like it to be, at the same time, where is my engine? I need the data on my engine now, versus issuing a report. So I would sum it up into these 5 factors in terms of what we're seeing.
It's fascinating. We've all gotten spoiled by these things, right? And now you're trying, how do you sum up these big industrial operations and get it to somebody on a cell phone instantaneously? I want to know. I don't want you to tell me, call me tomorrow or get it back to me next week. Well, how about from your perspective?
Well, the world is really, really changing. It's no longer the same way we operated in the past. Now the access to information is so quick. It changed very quickly. The talents required in order to make things happen is very hard to find. And clients are more looking into customized solutions and flexible solutions that can be changed in an agile way very quickly. So we're seeing a shift between a customer that wants to invest into a CapEx model, get his infrastructure operated over 20 plus years, to a client that says, listen, I want a long-term partnership. So you invest, we put an OpEx model, we put it over 20 years, but you have to be agile enough in order to keep up to date with the new digital transformation that is happening. So they're expecting a lot of upgrades happening year by year. And this is where, with Sanad, we're trying to make some business models within the airport ecosystem in a way that it is much more flexible for clients, and we can change at the same fast pace that the digital transformation is going.
Richard, I wonder, are the financing models changing to adapt to all of this change we're talking about?
Not at the sort of larger institutional level. I think that in small ticket financing, yes, there's been a lot of automation of the nature described here. But for what we see, I think the answer is no, not much has changed. I think it's a pretty conservative area. I mean, the only thing I would say is it's funny, if we close a transaction involving banks, I tend to get a big box of documents when we've closed the transaction. Okay. We tend to do everything with DocuSign, and we have no physical documents. And so I can see that. But otherwise, I think that we're a little insulated maybe from some of these changes at the customer level.
Well, is that good or bad then in terms of your ability to work with your customers and your clients and arrange finance?
Not really. I think that the expectation in the marketplace is that finance at this level sort of runs in the way that it has, and we're not seeing those kinds of pressures generally.
Just stability in that arena anyway to support commerce. Hey, so we've talked a little bit about how demands are changing and the expectations are changing. So what are you doing within your companies to meet those changes and really adapt your processes and systems to adjust to the new way of doing business?
You know, as a supplier that's been more of a traditional, design, build, manufacture, support, the whole digital revolution is impacting us in ways, small and large. Our machinists and mechanics are somewhat like Dr. Gupta last night now. They assemble a gearbox or an alternator that might have 300 parts. So how do we provide them with the digital information to assemble it? They bring the craftsmanship, the feel of what it takes to put together something complex. But the more we can do to give them access to information and history and materials, the sequence of work as an example. A big chunk of what we're doing is trying to revisit the value proposition and the social contract to work for the company. Because the old social contract was you show up, you do some work, we give you a paycheck at the end of the week and some health benefits. And nowadays, people, they learn through the pandemic that they want to balance their work life and personal life. They want flexibility, and they also want development. And so if we're not meeting the whole needs of the employee, we're going to lose them in this tight labor market to others. So that's we're spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to architect what we call the New Deal, this new contract with employees, in such a way that they're motivated, they're engaged, and they stay with us.
Yeah, Elias, do you see that as a challenge right now, workforce, and getting them to adapt to this new system? And how are you dealing with it?
Absolutely, absolutely. The fact that the world is changing and this digital revolution is unstoppable, the expertise required in order to adapt and provide what the customers are expecting based on what they see all over is very rare. And these expertise are young expertise. So you need to really being able to work in advance, having some type of projects with universities, attract students to work with us on small projects, so you can get them engaged so that when they get their diploma, they're right away hired, so we can start working on our customer needs. And as I was mentioning before, the model is changing from a CapEx to an OpEx model, whereby we need to be much closer to the client. Like for instance, in the UAE, we have an installed design center, whereby we take actually young talents from the Emirates, young talents from all over the planet to collaborate in some workshops to bring the client understanding where they want to go, how digital can transform their way, and establishing a solution together with a mix of employees that have experience and new students to come up with some type of a proof of concept for the client to look at it, play with it, and when he knows what he wants to do, then we will implement. The UAE actually is a great platform for that because it has a lot of startup incubators. It has a lot of young talent that went to study abroad, studied within the UAE, and now getting closer to companies like Thales from an international perspective.
It sounds like they need to own that relationship more, perhaps, than they did before. Really beginning to work with the customer, understand the customer at a deeper level than maybe had been the case.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is where this is going, and again, it's moving so quickly that you need to go with the same pace. Otherwise, you won't be able to follow. We see it a lot on the digital side, and now it's shifting more into the services side and into the manufacturing side, for which we perhaps will cover later on.
Yeah, I saw you nodding your head to that. Just the challenge, I guess, of finding the people, especially here in the United States, given the great resignation and the great retirement, who can do this work and can do this work this way that you guys are talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. The employees, when you're running, 3% unemployment, they've got choices, and especially if you work in ecosystems where there's lots of aerospace employers or similar industry employers, they can move around. And today, a lot of people are getting 50% pay bumps to jump and go to another company. So how do you keep them motivated? A lot of it's the nature of work and the people they work with. There's economic concerns, pay and benefits, but there's all these non-economic things that they care about. Like one of the areas I'm really passionate about is how do we extend to hourly employees the same flexibility that salaried employees had during the pandemic? And the ability to deal with house repair, elder care, their car registration, whatever, and get rid of a lot of this industrial revolution, command and control, work environment of oversight and punitive HR policies, get rid of all that stuff and trust the people to do the right thing and give them the flexibility. I think the key is create these high performance teams at the working level where they decide what days they want to work and what shifts they want to work. They know what the output goals are and the quality standards, but just about everything else is up for a reset. So I'm excited about leaving behind some of the vestiges of Henry Ford and River Rouge and getting to a new place.
I'm thinking about that, punching that clock every day, right? Punch in, punch out. That was Pittsburgh, like so many other industrial places for so long, and everybody's learning about how the world can change. Mansour, from your perspective,
I think, we're, our client base, I've mentioned this many times, our business is global. And the aviation industry, COVID has really hit the aviation industry very hard. And we always felt that from a labor perspective, we were isolated because what the aviation industry has seen is, one, you've got the COVID impact. Two, there is an aging workforce. Three, aviation is not seen as attractive and as, if I may use the word, as sexy as it used to be. People now find Google, they find Amazon, these as being more appealing. So even the pipeline is drying up. So if you look at the number that the aerospace industry needs purely from a mechanics perspective over the next 10 years, it's over 150,000 employees. Mainly the demand is coming from this part of the world. Now, what's happening as well is we're seeing a strong recovery of the aviation market, but access to talent is showing a huge, let's call it challenge, be it to airlines, be it to OEMs, be it to MROs. So I really think that we need to have a coordinated effort. To Dan's point, we need to go in early, go into schools that focus on science, technology, engineering and math, making sure that we work with universities in developing programs and getting these guys early. We sign them up early. And then as an employer, you need to have a strong value proposition. To Dan's point, we need to look at our comp and ben. We need to look at our policies. You want to be an employer of choice. So I think the human component of it is needed within our industry. A lot of people talk about robotics and automation, but our business is highly governed and we need people. And we're not there yet that these processes will get automated, because at the end of the day, redundancy is important in our business, and the redundancy comes through the human aspect in the business itself.
No, it's a really good point. Richard talked a little bit about how the banking system, the financial system hasn't changed all that much, but what kind of strategies are companies in your space using to come up with financing and to be able to build their businesses these days?
Well, in terms of this specific topic, with regard to workforce, certainly if they didn't know it before, people have learned that they don't necessarily need to be in the office in order to do their jobs. And I think that it's probably a great challenge to somehow get them to unlearn that fact, in spite of the fact that there are companies out there very much trying to do that, and how successful they'll be, I think remains to be seen. And there are certainly companies. I'm from the San Francisco area. There's a lot of companies who are trying to push people back into the office for a certain number of days of the week, and stories are people who are driving 80 or 90 miles a day in order to do this, and staying in hotel rooms and then going back to where they really want to live. And ultimately, those people are probably going to find ways to move on to other jobs. So I think it's certainly going to be a retention issue for sure.
Yeah, are you finding the people you need to do this kind of work in the world of high finance? You talk about the difficulty of getting people into aviation and competing with so many other industries. What's it like in your space?
I think that it's clearly a knowledge job where you can do everything you need to do sitting in front of a computer, and so given that reality, it's clearly a challenge.
Yeah, everybody.
Given that reality, and given the reality that a lot of people in finance probably have, shall we say, sort of conservative views about office place management and things like that, then it's a particular challenge.
That's fascinating. Well, just a reminder too, we've got about 10 minutes or so left for this panel. If anybody has a question, if I see you, hopefully I'll see you, somebody will, standing by one of the microphones, we'd love to bring you into the conversation with a question or a comment. We're talking so much about, more remote workers, we're talking about technology, all these issues. That has to bring to mind the issue of cybersecurity and the risks that are there as the chains become more complex, the systems become more complex. Is that something that's top of mind, Elias? And where does that fit?
Absolutely. Again, when we talk about digital revolution, it is inevitable to talk about cybersecurity, which unfortunately the attacks are expanding in a rate that is unbelievable, looking at about 150% increase every 6 months. So since everything is becoming data-centric and everything is becoming more digital, you need to absolutely know how to protect yourselves. Us in Thales specifically, we have over 2,000 engineers worldwide, and we invest about 1 billion euro just to get up to par, to make sure that all of our products, A, are cyber secured, and B, we ensure that whatever we sell to the client is protected, and we try to bring services also to the client base. Now, in the UAE specifically, we have partnered with the Dubai Electronic Security Council, and this is one of the first that ever happened in the world, and just happened in the UAE, whereby we are training governmental and semi-governmental entities in order to protect themselves against cybersecurity. And we have initiated what we call a cyber nod, which it is in real time. It shows an attack, and the employee or an executive is actually at his computer and he's getting an attack, and this allows him to have this awareness to avoid anything happening in the future. So indeed, cybersecurity is an inevitable topic, and fortunately many neglected. I like to compare it with COVID a bit. The virus was over there, nobody's seeing it, but when it hit the economy. So cybersecurity is there, the attacks are there. If you're not well prepared and it hits, the impact is unimaginable to the organization. So for me, it is really not only a cost avoidance, but it's risk mitigation that any company should invest in cybersecurity, because this is where it's moving.
Yeah, and I wonder, I think about you guys in the corner office, it has to be on your mind every day these days in terms of, is the risk becoming more and more something we really need to be worried about?
So I took a briefing on ransomware attacks.
Yeah.
And CEOs hate the cyber topic because it's one of those things, what can you really do against it? There's not much upside, there's a lot of downside. But the average ransomware demand and payment that's being made now is $30 million when a company gets hit, and payable in Bitcoin. And you only have typically a few days to respond, the time it takes to set up the payment and all that. And a lot of people are paying it, so it's becoming a cost of doing business that you can get insurance for, but it doesn't help your competitive advantage. So it's a topic that we're educating employees about and investing in better firewall technology and training folks on phishing attempts. But one of the areas they're getting in is if you're acquiring a company or you're partnering with someone, they'll go into the partner or the target company first, and they're already there. And then when you acquire the company, they get into your system. So they're very smart, and it is a cost of doing business now.
That's hard to believe, though. We're living in a world where you just have to take you make the investment. You see it the same way?
100%. I think it's the cost of doing business today, and especially for us, we're custodians of, technical data that if it goes into the hands of, someone in the wrong way, then, the risks are very high. So I agree with Dan that, as a business, you need to be proactive. The world is evolving, they're getting smarter, they're using different techniques. An example that we had a few weeks back, someone is writing to our employees using my name, and that was so you need to just be proactive, you need to have a team that is looking at the various risks, just so that you don't fall on the wrong side of it. And if you're on the wrong side of it, the downside is significant.
And are you finding the talent and the resources and the consultants you need to keep up and stay ahead of this?
I mean, on this particular aspect, I would say yes.
Okay.
But you need to be relevant in terms of the topics and the modes of attack that are happening. Because if something is happening in the US, it might not necessarily be happening in the UAE. You need to have a team that is looking at what are the new trends. In terms of, but cybersecurity is a very important topic.
Well, I know my son is in the master's program over at Carnegie Mellon for information security policy and management, which is a mouthful. But one of the things he just started, one of the things he's learned or he's been told as well, if you want to get into this line of work, you should go to work for a big financial services company first, because they have the toughest job. And then once you've done the financial services thing, you can go and every other industry is going to want to hire you. So it strikes me, you're in the financial services space. You must live and breathe cybersecurity type issues all the time.
Yeah, cybersecurity has always been a very big issue for any kind of financial service entity. And I think what we've seen is not so much that there's been an evolution of more technically adept attacks. But what we're seeing is the sort of non-technical attacks, the phishing emails that you used to get, and you would laugh at them because the English was bad, and you knew that they weren't real. And now we're getting emails that look precisely like they're real and like they're from someone in the organization. And it's much more subtle to try and figure out what you should or shouldn't respond to. And so that's a sort of a different type of skill that you have to teach to people in security training.
No, it's a really good point. We're all only as strong as our weakest employee who isn't paying attention to the rules and the way to do business. What I wanted to ask about is the whole idea of partnership in navigating this new world. And Dan, you and Mansour have mentioned that you have worked together in a while. In what way, and how do you think it plays to your advantage in terms of doing business in this new world of industrial services?
So one of the best advantages of partners is market access and speed to market, because the time it would take for me to grow relationships with the Middle East carriers in the case of Senate, or as the UAE invests in aerospace as a gateway to the Middle East and to India, they already have a presence, and I toured their operations, and I felt like I was in an American factory, very modern, well-staffed, and all the main customers that we support. So why replicate that? Why not take advantage of the existing relationships and capabilities that are in country? And then there's reach back to the U.S., the things that we do well, and I think will benefit Senate. So it does start with trust, and we trust them as an organization. And it's not mainly looking for sources of labor, although they have it. It's their market know-how and capabilities. So, and we hope to go to market for the global aftermarket demand, not just for the region.
So,
I mean, I would say for us, your question was, how are you addressing this evolving through partnership? I mean, first of all, we as a business associate ourselves with the best names in the industry, and Triumph is a great example of a leading aerospace firm that we would like, to associate ourselves with. That's one. Two, the way we are positioning the businesses, we would like to localize more of our capability and to being, self-reliant, so such that what that does, it makes us more competitive operationally, and ultimately that opens a market for us today that is untapped. And the example of what we're trying to do together is we're going to be signing today at 1 o'clock a deal that will create the region's first engine accessories facility. So what this means is today, Senate maintains an engine, but there are components that we don't maintain within our shop that we're sending to the US, Europe, Asia. So it localizes that capability, gives us that operational edge, and then together with Triumph, we want to penetrate the market, since we will be the region's first engine accessories facility.
that's fascinating. Localization becoming a factor as well as partnership increasingly for you, Elias?
Absolutely, absolutely. A partnership is key, as Dan was saying, specifically for go-to-market. So there is no need to replicate sites that we have all over the planet within the UAE. What we're doing is because of our ongoing relationship, because of the fact we've been there for 50 years covering defense and civil, we kind of work hand in hand with partners, try to establish what exactly can we localize from a technology standpoint and sometimes from a manufacturing standpoint in order to make it there, which will benefit both. So for me, it's inevitable. A, you save money, B, you save time, and C, you create more routes for potential growth, specifically for the positioning of the UAE, because it's close to everywhere. I don't know who mentioned it in the last days, but when you fly 8 hours, you cover almost 2/3 of the population. Well, this is a fact. The fact where the UAE is positioned, this makes it a key to localize many activities over there. The hard element into it is making sure that it's done very quickly, and we're making sure that we have the talent to support it, hence the reason why we have collaborations with the universities locally.
No, fascinating stuff. Only a little bit of time left, but I wonder, as you think about the business models and the financing models, given all this swirl we're talking about, how do you see that evolving? How do you see the world of finance, industrial services changing?
Well, actually, Mansour and I yesterday were talking about this specific issue, and I think that one way in which they may evolve is towards more usage-based pricing in equipment financing transactions, and that's certainly it's very much at odds with the way the business is traditionally done, and I think it's an area that probably the banks and maybe even most of the non-bank participants in the market are probably going to struggle to innovate in, just because of how they think about things and how they see the world, and how difficult it will be to change some, I think, what are very core concepts that would be necessary in order to actually implement usage-based pricing from a financing contract standpoint.
Interesting. So more to think about there. We're just about out of time for this panel, but I think what I'd like to do is give each of you an opportunity just for a final thought, something you'd like the audience to take away from this conversation that you think is really important to them as they think about how to navigate this ever-changing world in industrial services? I'll just go right down the line.
You know, I feel like I'm a student of history and was born in the early Industrial Revolution. I'm a big student of Henry Ford and Thomas Edison, and you think about what they accomplished, and if the digital transformation is the defining element of the fourth Industrial Revolution, what does that mean, and who's most stressed and impacted by that? And I really think it is the workers. You know, the equipment is being automated, the IT systems are progressing, but what has to catch up with that and adapt are the people. And so we don't end up with, you know, low skill, low pay jobs and a bunch of high skilled, high paid jobs, that there is a middle class and an opportunity for manufacturing and factory workers to advance, and it's going to require that they up their skills, and companies have an obligation to help them do so.
It's interesting. We heard Dr. Gupta talk last night about the danger of economic disparity and the anxiety and the stress for both the wealthy and the people on the line. And Petra talked in our first panel about how do we bring everybody along through this transition, in case she was talking about autonomous systems here in Pittsburgh. But it really is one of the great challenges, and it's one the world hasn't done a really good job with to this point. Hopefully we can find the way forward. How about from your perspective?
I mean, one thing that we're seeing, and is, you know, it's a theme that, you know, not one size fits all, and from a tailor-made perspective, what we're seeing is the demands of the end users are increasing. So being able to, being agile, being adaptable, being flexible, being able to cope with the needs of the market. So we're seeing a lot of customer needs and demands are increasing from a complexity perspective. And I think this is also a reflection of how the market is growing and the pressures. For example, today we need to think of how can I support my customer reduce their carbon footprint. So there are certain elements that are happening at a macro level that are really pushing the boundaries of what a service provider has to do. And then lastly, it's the people side, you know, part. You need to make sure that you've got a workforce that you are training and developing. You've got a workforce that is working in a culture that, you know, really makes sure that this individual comes to work happy. This individual comes to work aware of what are these challenges that the business is going through. So I think it's a challenging macro environment, and from a micro level, we need to make sure our systems and people ultimately are, you know, well coordinated to face this challenge.
Excellent. Richard?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting to think about equipment finance in relative to the trends in offshoring and then now onshoring. Because I remember back in the 1990s doing a lot of financing for semiconductor manufacturing equipment, and of course, virtually all those companies who were doing semiconductor manufacturing in the U.S., you know, offshored that, and now I think there's in that industry and in others more of an onshoring trend, and particularly given concerns about security of supply chain issues, and so I think that it will be hopefully a more enjoyable time to be in the equipment finance space than it has been over the past couple decades, where we've been sort of fighting against the tide, if you will, relative to capital investment here in the U.S.
That's fascinating. Elias, I guess you get the last word.
Well, the fourth industrial revolution is actually exciting for a digital leader like Thales, because now we're getting involved into some project in manufacturing. You're going from the era of a technician building a part, adjusting the machine to make sure it goes to perfection, to actually sensors being all over the machine, feeding information to a big data lake, for which provides some artificial intelligence modules, so that the machine automatically make perfection the parts without having to repeat the same mistake every time. So I think there's an overlap of generation, which is exciting. The generation that is used to the old way of doing things, and the new generation that comes in with software skills, capabilities that pushes the digital. So talent becomes hyper important, and I think this shift is going so fast that within the next probably 3-4 years, if we're sitting down here, whatever I'm saying becomes reality, because all you have to say to look at is your cell phone, as you mentioned earlier. Look at the cell phone 5 years ago, look what they can do today. So this is shifting very quickly, and it's very exciting, specifically for a digital leader like Thales.
No, it is fascinating. I think about my son, probably all our kids. They're all digital natives. They grew up with technologies that when we were young were completely unimaginable, and you wonder where it's going to take them and where it's going to take all of us in the whole world. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate it. All right, round of applause for our panel. You guys can go.